Oh, hi. Welcome to Aquata Zoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about non-confrontational leaders. I figured since we recently went over micromanagers as a type that you might have to navigate in your career, let's talk about some more. I personally have run into fewer of these non-confrontational type leaders than I have the micromanagers, but it is something that you might run into, and it's not something that's rooted in purpose or trying to cause a problem or maliciousness or anything like that. It's quite the opposite, but it's something that you need to learn how to navigate and recognize, because the results of a non-confrontational leader can be terrible. It can be very insidious. So what we're talking about here is a leader who generally maybe doesn't like to make a whole lot of decisions because it's so final, and they also tend to not want to get involved when there's issues in the workplace or with personnel. I know that seems weird. Why would you be a leader if you're going to be non-confrontational? If you're not going to make a decision, that's literally what the leader's job is, but it happens. And there's a few different reasons for that, and it's good to understand what's behind it before we start trying to tackle how to deal with it. Sometimes these leaders are the type that kind of were thrust into this position. Now, obviously, nobody can force a job change on somebody. That's a difficult thing to accomplish, right? But it's perhaps somebody who, in our case, in zoo and aquarium work, it tends to be somebody who maybe worked in a technical job and a leadership position opened. Maybe they'd been there the longest. Maybe they had the best, record of performance, etc., etc. And they end up in this job. They're looking for a little bit more money. They're okay with the title change, and they don't really understand what that means. And they don't have the skill set to go along with it, because that work is not the technical work anymore. Now it's people work. So they may just have developed this style by accident because they don't have any other leadership knowledge and skill to go off of. Or they're really trying to maintain that friendliness, that friendship with their peers that they've had, and now that they're in a leadership position, they just don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause any kind of discomfort. They just want everything to be harmonious, and therefore, because they don't want to get involved with the personnel problems, because they don't really want to make solid, definitive decisions, then they just kind of seem very wishy-washy, very nice, but not very good at the leadership tasks that they're expected to accomplish. Sometimes this can just be an artifact of the way that they were raised and the other types of leaders that they've been around. If they've only seen these non-confrontational leaders as parents or as, managers in their career, then they may just fall back on this style because it seems like the right thing to do. It's the only example that they've got, and at least there aren't additional problems, or so it seems, right? They're not causing additional strife in the workplace or among their team, and they just want everybody to get along and just get the work done, right? That is how it seems, but if you've ever worked for a non-confrontational, or I guess a laissez-faire kind of leader, then you would know how frustrating this can be, because sometimes you just need a definitive answer and you don't get one. Or sometimes you really need some guidance when it comes to dealing with another member of the staff, and they are just unable or unwilling to provide it. And then you feel like you're kind of on your own as a team member working under a non-confrontational leader. And so you have to solve your own problems. And that's when problems start to arise. Sometimes these folks tend to be more people pleasers. And if you tend to describe yourself as such, be on the lookout. As you go into leadership and management positions, be aware of how you're being perceived and what your behaviors might be, so that you don't necessarily fall into the non-confrontational or laissez-faire type of leader framework, because that can be troublesome for the folks that you're leading. Sometimes you just need a decision, and sometimes you're going to disappoint somebody, and that's part of the job. That's what you're expected to do, because we need to get things done. Your job is more to act in the best interests of your team overall, or to get the organization's goals met. And that may mean disappointing some people, which is hard to do, honestly. I don't like disappointing people either, but I do it on a regular basis, unfortunately, because that's my job. And so if you're a people-pleasing type, just understand that that doesn't necessarily work for leaders. You've got to make tough decisions. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to always be making people angry on your team all the time. The idea is that you're trying to build relationships with all these folks that you're leading, so that you may disappoint them from, every once in a while, but you'll be able to get them something else that matters more. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of give and take. It's not always disappointment. It's not always, working on their side all the time and making them ultimately happy. Like, that's not going to work. So just understanding that you've built relationships with these folks and that you're trying to do the best that you can, and being open and transparent about that will get you where you need to go without frustrating your entire team too much. So what happens when you're dealing with a non-confrontational leader and you come to them with concerns or questions and you're not getting definitive answers? It's just kind of wishy-washy, very nice. Of course, these folks are very, very nice. And that makes it harder, I think, because you want to, continue loving them so much, but you're also frustrated by their lack of answers. So what can happen with this? If you are coming to a leader with some issues or concerns about maybe a teammate or some behaviors that you're seeing, and they choose, their choice is to not do anything about it, or not answer any questions about it, or just, brush it off as not a big deal, whatever, and that continues to happen, you're left to fend for yourself. You're left to work it out among those people that you're having trouble with on your own, which could be good, could be bad. More than likely, it's going to end up being bad over time. And I've seen non-confrontational leaders who are very nice people, but who did not want to step in for some of these, squabbles. They start off small, right? But over time, more and more events happen, more and more behavior occurs, and none of it's corrected. And suddenly you have high-level people that are squabbling over really big issues that affect teams now instead of just individuals. I used to work for an organization that had one of these leaders and who was leading a very large team. And the people underneath that level, that non-confrontational level, were constantly fighting amongst themselves, trying to get resources, trying to, work on their own projects, and it was not working out well among them. Now, the teams that all those people led were in a nightmare because it was constant fighting. And so, one of these mid-level leaders would say, "Oh, you're not allowed to talk to so-and-so in their team because I'm mad at them." And so, basically it just turned into an organization-wide fight. It was really silly, but that's how these people were quote unquote raised, because they had worked at this organization for many years and they just had learned to fight for everything because they had a leader that was non-confrontational. So I will always keep that in the back of my brain when I deal with people who have trouble, with the people pleasing and not being able to come up with a definitive answer, and that sort of leadership style. In the end, it becomes a leadership style, which is not particularly helpful. It's not necessarily bad. It's so hard to label it as bad. It's just not as productive as probably a lot of our organizations would like. So enough about that. You got an idea of what this type of leader looks like and how they operate. They're there for you. They want to listen, but they're not necessarily going to offer a whole lot of help, right? They're not going to offer suggestions that could really solve this problem. They'll just kind of dance around things and, you're kind of left on your own to figure it out, right? So that's the type of person that we're talking about. Well, how do you deal with somebody that is like this? It can be challenging and it can be exhausting, to be fair. First of all, it's important to understand how you're approaching them and not just coming to them with a problem. I've heard many times in my leadership studies the thought or the common saying that don't come to me with problems, come with solutions. That's kind of what we're looking at here, right? Not necessarily solutions, but just show that you've been pondering it, and less about I'm having problems with so and so and then leaving the sentence there at just like that, but more I'm struggling with this issue and I'm wondering what you think of my possible approaches to alleviate what I'm seeing here, right? And so you give them a couple of thoughts that you had about how this might be alleviated. This is a little tougher when it comes to like personnel problems, but the point is that you can't necessarily just come to this non-confrontational leader and say, I have a problem with this. This type of leader is already having a little bit of trouble, not trying not to disappoint people and trying to come up with a definitive answer that they think is really going to work. There's a lot going on. There's possibly a lot of fear and anxiety in them that they're kind of concerned about, right? And it kind of fogs everything as they're thinking about it and they want to try to help you, but not necessarily at the expense of everyone else. They're trying to keep things harmonious. They're trying to keep the peace. They don't want to rock the boat. And so if you can come to them and show that you've been thinking about it a little bit and give them a few options to kind of get the ideas flowing. So it's not necessarily all I'm having a problem with this or with so-and-so and I expect you to solve it for me. It is more like, I'm having trouble with this. I'd like to hear your thoughts about how I can navigate this and that you've put thought into how to solve the problem without rocking the boat yourself, right? That you want to solve this amicably, and that you have a couple of options and they might be able to give you a better idea of how they think that would work. I have made this mistake before, right? I went to a non-confrontational leader and I said, hey, I'm having trouble with so-and-so. And I framed it as, you have been working with this person for decades and I'm just not sure what to do at this point. And so it was basically like, I have a problem with this. What do I do? And I didn't know at the time. I was very young. I didn't know what I was doing. So learn from my mistakes is basically what I'm saying. Come to them with some solutions or some evidence that you've been thinking about it and trying to solve it in an amicable way so that they don't feel like they're being told you need to help me at the expense of that or at the expense of this person who they don't want to upset. That makes this a little bit easier of a conversation to have because they can evaluate what you've been thinking about and give you some guidance on your thought process or, help you choose one that is going to work better than the other. Maybe they do know this other person a little bit more and have a better idea of how they're going to react and that sort of thing. They can guide you on that sort of stuff. It's not necessarily a locked in kind of I'm going to favor you at the expense of this other person sort of decision. It's just let me give you some guidance here. Let me tell you what I know. That kind of hands-offish, like very high level response that they probably feel most comfortable in until you come up with your own decision in the end that hopefully they can support. I would say, as with all leaders, for your benefit as well as theirs, document everything. If you're being asked to do tasks and, maybe the task is complicated, requires many steps or whatever, is going to take a long time, anything like that. And when you're dealing with leaders that have some behaviors that are a little challenging, always document everything, right? So you can reference it when you are working on that task list that they gave you or that big project and you forgot what you had said and what you had agreed to do. You have a record that you can go back and look at that shows, oh, we talked about it on this day and here's what we decided together, right? So even though you can have these like impromptu meetings and discussions that are pretty quick and on the fly and everything, always try to send an email afterwards that says, here is this right? We discussed this and this and this, and we decided to go about it this way or try this thing. And I'm going to go with that until you tell me otherwise. And so then, you have a written record that you can go back and look at later if you need it. And also you just have record of the meeting and what you discussed, so that if there were ever a problem that was caused by, a leader or any kind of question about behavior and favoritism and that sort of thing, because that can tend to nag at a non-confrontational leader, then you have a record of it. You're protecting yourself, and, it's easier to reference an email where you had written down what you had discussed rather than going back and asking them again or trying to remember it from memory. Sometimes it just doesn't work. So you have a record. Always record everything, because that just makes life easier later. Another technique that you can use is kind of coming to them not so much with a direct question about should I do A or B, or will you help me deal with this person? Those are pretty direct, and they can rock the boat, right? So rather than coming to them with that, ask them for more like devil's advocate kind of thing. So like, what would you think could happen if we went this route with this project? Or how do you see us being successful in this other project that we've been working on where we've kind of gotten hung up? Like, more of their opinion, more tapping into their experience and getting an idea of what they've dealt with or how they see it, if it's any different than yours. Like, do you see this differently than I do? Like, straight up asking them that, and getting their ideas and opinions that way might help you make your decision, because sometimes they just don't want to make that decision for you as they should necessarily, or they just want to leave it up to you. If nothing else, that will give you kind of a primer. You've had this discussion, they've given you their opinions, their thoughts, their experience. That serves as a primer to the decision that you end up making, right? You can kind of reference that discussion again if they don't understand, if they come to you and they don't understand why you made that decision. Why did you go that route, even though they fully gave you the authority because they didn't make the decisions themselves, right? So then, especially if you have it recorded somehow, not necessarily by voice, because that might be illegal. I don't know. It depends on where you live. But if you have a written record of it, like you said in an email, here's what we talked about. Here you said these were your thoughts. Do I understand that appropriately? They can correct it. They can, have a little bit of time to think about it. They might actually want to make a decision at some point, which would be lovely and very helpful. Because sometimes these folks tend to leave large decisions to people who are not necessarily equipped with all the knowledge and experience and insight that they should have, right? That's the leader's job, So anyway, if you tap into their expertise by being crafty about it in your approach, then you still get access to that, and then you can make the decision, but not entirely without their knowledge or understanding, because you've kind of walked through the possibilities together in that way. So it's kind of covering your butt too. If you want to be more structured about how this works, set up some meeting time with them and give them an agenda. More than likely, you're going to have a one-on-one at some point, whether they want it or you want it. You should probably have it, right? And so go ahead and set up an agenda and let them know the things that you want to talk about. Tell them you want to rapid fire at them, maybe a bunch of, decisions that you need them to make, or disguise it differently, like red light, green light. I don't know. Just so they feel like they aren't making huge decisions. They're little things, most likely, but it's not a yes, no. It's not a yes to you at the expense of somebody else. It's not rocking the boat. It's just, we need decisions. You are technically the one who's supposed to make them. You're refusing to make them, which is part of your leadership style. And we're just going to rapid fire. You don't even get to think about it. I'm just going to hit you with a bunch of things that I need decisions on, right? And just set them up for that. Put it in the put it in the agenda that you want to have, so that they understand that this is coming. We're going to do rapid fire, right? Or I just want to run a bunch of things by you and get your thoughts. That kind of thing. Again, you're approaching them, trying to hear what their experience insight thoughts might be so that you can make the decision that ultimately they probably should be making, but you're going to do it anyway. If there's anything specific that you need from them, definitely highlight it. Tell them specifically, I need you to do this. They may not be super comfortable with that, but hopefully as a leader, they will understand that those things are necessary. They have to remove some blocks for you or make things a little bit easier or help you out. That is literally their job. Everyone if they're refusing to make decisions or, rock the boat or anything, and they're just trying to make sure everybody stays in a harmonious state and everybody keeps the peace, you have things that they need to help you with and that you're going to need them to do as your leader. They should be able to help you with those things. So especially if you have a one-on-one meeting with them and you can list those things out, throw it on your agenda as well, but you can list those things and tell them specifically, I need you to do this. So you're making the decisions for them, so that makes them feel better because it's not them that's rocking the boat, it's you. Listen, I know how ridiculous this sounds, and I'm sorry, but sometimes you run into these leaders that are just so uncomfortable with the possibility of causing trouble or causing, discord in their working relationships that they just won't do it. So rather than losing all of your forward momentum or being unable to do anything, you can kind of make those decisions for them if you have to, right? At least things will keep getting done, and it is frustrating to do that, but, progress has to happen. What you don't want is the confrontations still happening among you and your peers, and that non-confrontational leader not wanting to deal with that, and then you all turn into monsters. It does happen. I've seen it happen, and it's really, really unfortunate. It takes a long time for that to happen, but you put people together working in a group long enough where the leader's not making many decisions and they don't want to rock the boat, the people start squabbling among themselves and they just turn it into a fight every single day. And that's what you don't want. So if you can kind of still get things moving without the lack of decision making from that leader, then it's probably going to be in everyone's best interest, and there's really nothing to fight about at that point, right? You've made a decision that's informed, and hopefully they're backing you up on it because they're not making the decision, you had to make the decision, and they left that authority to you, so then they can back you up on it when push comes to shove and people have issues with it. But that's also a risk with non-confrontational leaders. You're not sure what they're going to do as far as they might not back you up on your decisions. At that point, you might need a higher level leader to kind of step in and figure something out, right? And if that non-confrontational leader is at the top of your organization, I'm not sure what to tell you on that. That's a really tough one because it's a leadership style that is a lack of leadership style, if that makes sense. These are folks who are exceedingly nice. Like, they're always nice. And they kind of are nice at the expense of being kind, if that makes sense. So, like, they would rather not hurt anyone's feelings than to do the right thing, which is to give people direct feedback or make decisions that are going to disappoint some people, but also keep the organization moving ahead and meeting its goals and doing its mission. So, in my opinion, laissez-faire and non-confrontational leaders are so because they don't have any other type of leadership skill. And it's not the end of the world. You can always learn it. It's never too late to learn it. It's fine. If you happen to be a people pleaser and you're really unnerved by this, do not panic. You can always learn these skills, learn how to be a little bit more assertive and definitive in your decision making, and please don't put it on other people. That's not fair. They don't get paid for that. You can still be a good leader. Do not worry. It's just that if you depend on your people pleasing and your niceness to get you through leadership, it's going to be a bumpy ride for everybody around you. Being nice is not giving someone the feedback that they need to improve in their work or improve in their skills. Being kind is giving them that feedback so that they can grow and become a better employee or a better person. or learn those skills that are going to be really important and serve them in the future. You're doing them a service. That is being kind. Being nice is just smoothing things over and pretending like it never happened, or just not making or not ruffling any feathers, just trying to keep the peace, just trying to, make it all go away. Make it seem like it never happened, right? We never had this disagreement. It's okay. At that point, you're just being nice. You're not being kind. You're kind of kicking the can down the road, I guess, and making this tomorrow use problem. Which is also not fair to you either, right? If you're a non-confrontational leader, by not confronting some of these issues, they're going to compound, or they're going to just be a persistent problem in the future. And I don't know about you, but I like to try and solve my problems right off the bat and just not have to worry about them after that because they're already solved. Not just kicking the can down the road and expecting myself or someone else later to solve these problems later. In the organization where I worked, where there was a non-confrontational leader, it was kind of kicked down the road a little bit. And so when that person left and all these leaders, these mid-level leaders who were fighting amongst themselves, moved in position a little bit, or were just left there without this non-confrontational leader, that made things very difficult for the next leader after that. And also just did not do those mid-level leaders any services. They gained reputations for being combative and not working well with others and all these unfair things, honestly, that they could have corrected decades beforehand. And they didn't. And therefore, it was, many years down the road when that non-confrontational leader left and a new leader came in, their life was a nightmare, as was all of the people working in these teams being led by these middle manager folks. It was just a mess. And I would love to never have that happen again for anybody. It's just such an insidious style or lack of style because you don't think it's going to cause a problem, but the problems that it causes are very large if left to fester forever. If they go uncorrected for long periods of time, it's a huge problem. But it's not something that's really hard to fix either. If you're dealing with a leader who's non-confrontational and you kind of approach them differently and modify how you're asking them questions and you're recording everything, they may pick up on their own that what you're doing is kind of part of their job and that they should probably be doing some of these things. They should be sending out an agenda. They should be the one making these decisions. They should be the ones that are, coming up with these suggestions for how to deal with the team. It shouldn't be on the team members to do that. It should be on the leader to do that. They may pick up on that on their own and correct it. These are skills that can be learned. They can adopt a style that is actually effective and that actually works for them. And so if it's a non-confrontational leader that is a product of just not having leadership skill, they can learn that. And if it's somebody who just wants to be nice, they can learn to understand that nice isn't going to cut it. You have to be a little bit assertive. Like, you don't have to be aggressive, but you do have to make decisions and keep up with the job expectations that have been bestowed upon you, right? And that's when it makes it a little bit more important for the manager of the non-confrontational leader to really be understanding and aware of what's going on so that they can help correct the issue. They can get this person some training. They can really talk about how leadership looks and works and kind of fill in some of those blanks that they might have and deal with some of that fear and anxiety. Reassure them that everything's going to be okay, even if you make a mistake while making a decision. It happens all the time. So anyway, that's the non-confrontational, laissez-faire type leader. They're not very helpful because it seems like they want to put off all of the heavy decision making and things like that to their team, which is unfortunate and difficult for the team to deal with. Hopefully you have picked up some tips and tricks about how to deal with this type of leader. It can be frustrating, but they're very nice people, so it's hard to be mad at them. So help them along in their leadership journey. I'm sure once they get things under control, they'll be able to help you too. And if not, then you at least learn what not to do, right? I've made an entire career out of learning what not to do. So I think that you can too. Same goes for laissez-faire and non-confrontational leadership. It's a thing that happens from time to time. It's not anything malicious, but it's a challenge. You can deal with it. They can learn some skills, and you can be aware of it when you see it. At the very least, so you know how to deal with it. If you have any questions about that or any other leadership or management things or zoo and aquarium stuff, you can write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget you can follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay. Thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.